So, hi everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so thrilled to have John Crutchfield here with us. I met John not so very long ago, and what I really was interested in is he travels. He just went to Africa and he teaches children. Well, he does this regularly as a teacher. He has a program he calls I Promise, and he teaches children about money. He's also written a book to teach children about money, and I just bought the book because I was just doing a little background and trying to catch up. I got into my hotel room. I'm traveling, as you all know, and he's got 5-star referrals on his book. So if you have children or if you never got anyone to talk to you about money, this would be a great book to buy. So welcome, John. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hey, Peggy, how are you doing?
Doing really well. So John's going to do about a 20-minute chat, and then we'll go into questions and answers and have a lot of fun with this.
Well, thank you, Peggy, for the invitation. Hello, everybody that's on the call. Just looking at your backgrounds to try to find some things to smile about together. I've been seeing some funny things on the news lately about people in their Zoom meetings. A lot of the corporate people are having like come to work as your Zoom self day. Have y'all seen that? Well, you come to work with your shorts and it looks like you have a blazer on and maybe your pajamas on your bottom. And that this is so funny seeing some of the photos, but I did meet Peggy just a little while ago, and since then I have gone to Ghana, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But I do appreciate the invitation, and look forward to meeting all of you. What I'll do is just kind of start with the introduction of what I do. Yes, Cliff. Hey, look. The meaning of what do they say, TMI, too much information, has changed. But I see your comment in the chat there. But I will start with a little introduction. I'm John Crutchfield. I'm based out of the Dallas, Texas area. Although my business kind of takes me all over the place. I am a former public education teacher. My mom is a teacher. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, and my parents still live there now. I grew up with a mom who was in K-12 education. She was a business education teacher. And so just really instilled the value of education in me. Did all those fun things you get to do in school, like the Tropicana speech contest and some talent shows and all those kind of things. And I'm a international baccalaureate graduate, which is the IB program. A lot of you all are familiar with. So program works. Grew up on the south side of Tallahassee in a 600 square foot house. If I showed you guys a picture of the house, you just wouldn't believe it because I have 2 siblings. My brother is 11 months younger than me, and then my sister is 5 years younger. So 5 people, 624 square feet. As you can imagine, we stayed outside a lot as kids, playing outside, playing with our friends. We could go as far as the stop signs, and now my kids can't go outside alone at all. It's like different day and age. But when I went to college, I went to Florida State. I'm a Florida State grad. Studied, to become a teacher like my mom. Went into education and taught math and social studies. And just really fell in love with the idea of communicating with kids, being an inspiration for them, being a role model. Education has truly changed my life. And I believe like it can be so impactful to kids from all different walks and backgrounds to get a solid education. It's just like foundation of life. FSU in the house, Florida State, Doug, absolutely. So yes, and yes, we did beat LSU a couple of weeks ago, and I'm gonna say it on here, just saying. My wife has a degree from LSU, so I'll get into that story. I taught in Baton Rouge, so went to Florida State, got my degree, moved to Baton Rouge, taught in Baton Rouge. I taught at Broadmoor Middle School for 4 years. My wife that I met graduated from LSU, and then I became an assistant principal of schools, and kind of followed that pathway of teaching, assistant principal, principal of a school. I moved to Memphis and was a principal at Humes Middle School for 3 years. And that was very, very interesting. Humes, for history folks, is the former school of Elvis. It's where he went to. It was a high school when he went to Humes. But Humes is right around the corner from St. Jude Research Hospital, which I have an affinity for and what they do for children and families. Several of my students went to school at Humes, but they came from receiving support and services from the hospital. So I still run and do some activities for St. Jude and raising money for them, that sort of thing. So like let's get into kind of that's a little bit of my background. After I was a principal for those 3 years, I took a job working for Ole Miss. So I've been around the little world, hotty toddy, right? And I was a professor that was training teachers on how to get their teacher's license. I taught some classes on how to get your leadership license in administration. And that kind of freed up my time to become an entrepreneur, right? Started a business in real estate. That's primarily where I spend a lot of my time these days, is development, rental properties, that sort of thing. But I won't focus on that because I know what Peggy wants to talk about. But that business has afforded me some time freedom to be able to do some things that I wouldn't normally get to do, right? So these books that Peggy's excited about kind of sprouted from just the idea that I still wanted to give back in education, even though I'm not full-time in public schools anymore. I still wanted to give back to schools, still wanted to be able to visit schools and have a reason to do so that wasn't weird, right? So my daughter, who's 8 now, and I really just kind of thought about some of the songs that I would sing her as a kid, sing to her, some of the issues that come up for children, and some of the things that I would have wanted to tell other people's kids, since I get to tell my own. And so the work that Peggy's talking about is called Money Lessons from Mr. John. And really what I try to do is like, okay, all the stuff that my kids have to deal with, I call them lessons of the day, right? Just imagine driving in your car and you've got an 8 and a 10-year-old behind you, and you don't want to use the time for listening to music or talking on your cell phone. I'll say, all right, kids, it's time for a lesson of the day. And they're getting a little older now, so I hear a little bit of the, man, but not too much. They're still kind of excited to hear these lessons. And I started just jotting them down when I would talk to them about them. Like, what are some things that, kids should know, and how do you put them in easy language that makes it accessible to them? How do you make things rhyme where they don't feel like it's a real lesson, right? How do you make them interested in the topic? And that's really where the book stemmed from. So Money Lesson for Mr. John really walks them through concepts that to us as adults, we probably heard of like at a much older age, right? Things like saving or investing, things like stocks and real estate investments. It really walks them through some of these topics at an accessible way, where they hopefully will never forget them. And I really market this to children and families of all ages, of all kinds, because the idea is for parents to be able to have some of these conversations with their children, even if like they didn't get these conversations growing up. And that's really how I market it. Like, I want folks to be able to have these conversations with their kids at night when they're in bedtime, or in their car on the way to school, on the way to work, wherever they're going. And that's really the point. So different times throughout the year, I do go into schools and share. I read, I sing, some of the lessons there. This one is more of a rhyming book. But really the reception that it gets is you find kids that, especially in K-5, you find kids that have never heard of some of this stuff, or their parents are really nervous about talking to them about these things because they may or may not be good with money, or may not feel very confident in how they're handling it. But the kids want to have these conversations because they're seeing it on different channels that they see already, right? Money starts at a very young age, of them starting to see it in their cartoons and their shows and on their iPads. And a lot of them are using, how do I say it, fake money for their video games and tokens that they have to purchase things with. So the earlier we can start having these conversations with them, the better. I'm really, really passionate about making sure that kids, no matter where they come from, have these conversations and are able to talk to each other, but more importantly, talk to their parents about these things in a controlled way, where they can start to say, okay, what are the 3 things you do with money? Those things are in the book, right? In rhyming form, right? What does that look like? And how do you see mommy and daddy doing this now, right? Or how do you see grandparent doing it now? How do you see this happening in your own life? And the funniest thing that's ever happened is having this conversation with kids, having them be able to say, make corrections on their parents' behavior, right? Because that's how they use this, right? Like, wait, you're not saving, right? You're not investing. You're spending it all. Don't spend it all. And it's correction from kids can be some powerful things sometimes. So I think that's where we start, is an introduction. Primarily, like I said, I spend a lot of time in the real estate investing world, but this is one of my pet projects and one of the things that I never get tired of talking about. So Peggy, I definitely appreciate you for bringing me on, and would love to talk to you all further about this or other things on the Nest Egg Builder show.
Can you give us an example about one of the lessons? Like, what do you sing to the kids?
Yeah, so hold on. I'm going to go grab a book. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Yeah, I should have bought the book when I asked him to come on, but I didn't get around to it. So
I put the link in the chat for everybody also.
Oh, thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you for doing that, Clift. So, I'll read a line because you'll kind of get the idea of it from me reading a line here. And I'll show you graphically that it's a very well illustrated book. And what's interesting about the illustrations is that this is actually how my family looks, right? Like caricatures of my family. So you've got me. My son actually does wear blue glasses, or he did at the time. He may have gotten green ones now. My wife's hair is like this, and my daughter likes her two little puffs in her hair. But I'll read this line here. So money is just a tool, but every tool has a purpose. Whether you have it or not, it doesn't tell you what your worth is. It makes it easier to have it if you need it. So Mr. John wrote this book because I want you to read it. So it's a very conversational kind of book, very easy to access the language, right, for kids. And I'll skip to the end and maybe get a couple of the lessons.
Oh, that'd be nice. Because we all need them too.
Yeah, we do. We do. All right. So in line with what I do, right, for business, we call something an asset if it brings in money. So if you buy it, make sure that there's a plan to have it make money. We call something a liability. I know it sounds silly, but if it costs you every month, do you need it really? Right. And then there's an illustration of assets in the book, and there's, the this other page that talks about stocks a little bit. But it's not going to go in depth to the point where a kid wouldn't be able to access the vocabulary. But there is some vocabulary here where I want parents to be able to have a conversation with their kids, right? Like, what's an asset, mom? Really, what does this mean? Of course, my kids getting what they get from me would probably be like, all right, dad, here he goes again, right? But a kid who hasn't heard this word before is prompted to maybe say, what is this? Let's talk about it further. What assets do we have in our home, right? And if I go to schools, I ask questions like this. So, this is it's not super long. Usually if I'm reading it to kids, I might pause and show illustrations or ask some questions, but usually it's a 20-minute session of call and response, asking questions, and giving them an opportunity to express themselves as well. At this age, that's super important.
Yeah, is it the idea to have them start a conversation and ask questions?
Absolutely. The more engagement, the better. It's a general good teaching practice, and you could probably see it in me here. Even like going for long periods of time without soliciting a response is usually not the most engaging strategy.
Sure.
So I'm looking at certain faces, and every time I see faces give me some feedback, that's giving me what I need. So thank you, Desiree and Kathy. I see you as well. I see, is it Nika? Nika as well. But the faces on the profile help for sure. And Kathy, good to see you, Kathy. It's funny seeing familiar names in here too. That's good.
You too.
Yeah. I don't know I know we've been on a Zoom, but it may be a year since we've been on the Zoom. So
I do have a question though. It's about your mother. You said your mother taught business.
Yes, she taught business ed. So she taught students in high school that, like, if they need like the keyboarding skills or I guess just like some financial literacy that you would get in high school. I didn't take business ed in high school, but that's what she took. So I think it would be more for students that might I know like keyboarding, general business principles, general like work skills principles. It was like a technical school. So that's what they taught.
So
I didn't get that.
Oh, she didn't give that to you? She didn't talk to you about money? Because
I'm
if
sure
you're gonna run
she
a business, you got to have money, or you got to figure out how to either create an asset or create a liability, or both.
Yeah, believe it or not, and I talk about this a lot, money was taboo in my home. So we didn't talk about money. Like, I may have stumbled across bank statements from my dad and where he left them, but it's actually something I talk about now, like with parents, is like, we should be having these conversations and be sharing the information. But in my house, like, I never knew what the financial status of my house was. I mean, we didn't really go without anything, but based on like the practices of my parents, I would have thought we didn't have anything. And my parents would always talk about getting a new house. And I told y'all about the house that we lived in, but like, they didn't build their new house until all of their kids were grown and out. It's so funny. And so they still own the house that we grew up in. And we, like, when I go to Tallahassee, I drive my kids by it and we talk about it, take pictures in front of it as they get older. But money was actually very taboo in my house. Conversations like these did not happen. I remember being 16 and my dad taught me how to write a check. And it was like the first time we had talked about money at all. And he talked to me about hourly wages and how much he made. I remember that one conversation that we had. And that's why I remember it, is because it was so taboo in our house.
Yeah, well, that's pretty common and normal for most, pretty much I'd say 99% of the people in this group. Same.
Yeah.
Just didn't talk about it. I don't know what one of the reasons, I mean, this is me jumping to conclusions. It's the only exercise I got today anyway, was they didn't know how to talk about money because no one ever talked to them about money. So how do you talk about money when you really don't know? So like that. So That's really great. So yeah, I was curious how much your mom talked to you about money. Typical, just typical.
Yeah, I
Anybody
think
have some questions for John? Most of you have kids. Do you have curious questions about how you could have a conversation with your children, or an easy way to start that conversation?
I have a question. How old or what is the age range that you are directing your book to?
yeah, that's a good question. So I think from the feedback that I have gotten, it's actually pretty darn entertaining to adults too. but I do generally target it towards elementary school. So K through about 4th or 5th grade is generally where I'm going to go in and read or engage. Yes, Ted, I agree. Yeah, those are pretty taboo topics. Sex ed generally starts now in like 6th grade. Financial education usually is not discussed at all, or if it is, closer to 11th grade. So kind of give you a little background, in most schools, it's not touched until 11th grade, if it is touched at all.
Which is when the kids need money to go to college and they haven't put a dime away because.
Yes, yeah. But to answer your question, K through 5th grade is generally a good target. The older the kids get, the more they generally have had some interaction with money, or some you get more examples that you can give from them. The younger kids generally like the clapping or the rhyming, just the activity part of it a lot more.
And so excuse me, I don't remember how old a 5th grader is. Can you?
Yes, so 5th grade is about 10 years old.
Okay.
And kindergarten is around 5.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Okay,
5 to
good.
10, 5 to 10. Yeah.
Alvin,
Hi, good afternoon.
Hey, Alvin.
Hi, I apologize for joining late, but what I caught was a very good. I mean, I there's so much I could say. I don't even know where to begin. But what I would like to share is that I think it was just last year when I was participating in one of the parent-teacher groups at my son's high school, and when I volunteered to come and teach the financial calculator to some of the kids in one of the clubs. The teacher was really going for it at first, and then we got into the larger group of the administrators, and he had mentioned something about it. So I went on ahead and started sharing a little bit of what I would be teaching, because I didn't want them to make the mistake of thinking that I was going to be teaching them how to be a real estate agent. And so when I started mentioning the financial calculator, calculating debt payments, things like that, everybody got kind of silent. And so one of the counselors, he took my number down and called me after the meeting. And I would like to confirm this with you, Johnoson, is there some sort of an apprehension that school administrators have, or the brass at the unified district level may have? Because what the counselor explained to me is that they're resistant to talk to the kids about such things because it'll discourage them from getting, basically getting what's their first debt going into college and so forth. And so he was just kind of describing that they're, really not for that sort of education for the kids. Is that what you've experienced, or is it a little bit different with the nature of what you're doing?
I think, let's see, how do I say this? I think in general right now, especially in public schools, there's an attention to what's coming out of the mouth of any educator, right? And so as a principal, I saw how, in certain classrooms, there's a heavier focus on certain materials versus other classrooms. And so I appreciated a curriculum, right? I appreciated material that kind of guided the thoughts of the teacher and like you had material that was commonly assessed. I think as a principal, I'm always nervous because, you know, kids say the darndest things, but so do teachers. And so I was always nervous about what teachers might say to kids. I think parents want to know what their kids are learning, and things don't always come out right when students go home and talk to their parents about what they learned. So yes, I think there's an apprehension around what's going to be communicated to kids and children. And I think that's why it's important that we have materials to guide some of these conversations at home and at school, right? To where it's not just somebody's perspective. And I'll give you an example of this. I was a 7th grade teacher and I was a high school principal, okay? I never once, and I taught social studies and math. So somebody mentioned in the chat that they got 9 weeks of economics. I taught less than 9 weeks of economics in 7th grade to my students. We didn't talk about assets or liabilities or anything like that. We talked about things like, you know, supply and demand, you know, right? Stuff that is in an economics textbook. But here's a great example. Because of my perspective growing up with a mom who was a teacher and a dad who worked for a college, he was an accountant, right? Because of my perspective growing up with them, both of them worked for, you know, the government, basically. My mom worked for the Leon County school system. My dad still works for Florida State now. Because that was my background, and even though I got trained to be a certified teacher in these subjects, I never once mentioned to my students that they could own a business, right? And I taught for 4 years. I was a principal for another 3, right? I never told students that they could own a business. I never talked to students about investments, never, because that's not in the textbooks, right? So because of my background, the kids that I taught for that period of time would not have been encouraged to go to, you know, to grow a business. They would have been told what I did, right? What was stable for me, which was go to college, you know, get a degree, get a great job. And I think that having curriculums and materials that are diverse and broad and fully informative can really make a difference for students. And I've got students now who I follow on social media who connect with me from time to time, who became great business owners and great small business owners, but they didn't get it from me. You know? And I think that's important to think about when we're having these conversations with our young people.
That's
Who's
great.
talking.
And
Yeah.
just
Hi,
really
Sean.
quick,
Yes,
if
hi,
I
Sean's
could-
got a question, and he is a teacher, so it could be fun. Hi, Sean.
Right on, brother. Everything that you were saying was spot on. I'm a high school and pseudo school administrator here in New York. And as you said, economics is not taught until the last semester of 12th grade, which is terrible as a standard part of the curriculum here in New York City. I even had run-ins with the social studies teacher because I taught entrepreneurship at the 11th grade level, and I started with my economics unit and referenced his class that wouldn't come for 2 years from now. And as you spoke about, most kids are not getting a financial literacy formally introduced to them. It's the creativity of the teacher. So I am potentially being blessed tomorrow with a visit from Peggy, and we implemented a driver's ed class this year. Half of my driver's ed class, I told them they're going to be learning real estate concepts because I've convinced my administration to allow me to teach a real estate class in the spring semester. So infusing these ideas and getting the students comfortable enough to maybe even talk to the administrators and other teachers about it, and they really see that students are interested in this stuff, because you got to pique their interest. Today, we were looking at an apartment building across the street, and I told them that not only one person owns that, it's probably a group of people that invested their money, and they were really like looking at me and really getting that idea of it's us that infuses these things in the students, and it's what the teacher is going to do. And if a teacher isn't comfortable doing these things or stepping out of the box based on what's in a textbook, it never happens.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you.
And thank you for doing that. And kudos to your administration, right? For taking your passion and letting you go with it. It's going to be pretty interesting. Question: did they have you are they having you submit the things you're going to talk about prior to? Are they being careful with what you're
I
presenting?
would say so. I think the line that you're going down, if a teacher was going to be introducing something new, then as you said, when you were administrator, there is a emphasis to want to know what's going to be going on in that classroom, because the administrator, when the parent is calling, has to be able to be accountable and speak to it. I think in my role, since I would say I'm very close to administration, as well as I'm the teachers union rep. They kind of know that, I'm not going to go too far out of the gray. So even as I've tell these things to my administrators, there is supportive and wanting to see what am I trying to do, because they push a very strong emphasis on, if we're not making the class interesting, whether you're teaching social studies, math, or English, you got to find a way to engage the kid, because if you're just throwing information at them, it's not going to stick.
Right. Yeah. And kids want to talk about this. This is something that a lot of people think may not be the case, but kids like having these conversations and they like discussing it. It's one of the most real world applicable type of things to discuss, right? You can give so many examples, from their games to the shoes that they like, to the clothes, to the things that they do for recreation, and create real world scenarios that are very engaging. So kudos to you, and thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
Alvin. Thank you, Tyshawn. Alvin.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with what your response was before, to ask you the question: how much leeway do you have as a principal? And it kind of sounds like Tyshawn kind of alluded to that a little bit, but me as a father, my son is 16 years old and he's a junior. And I did have a conversation with him, several months ago, about him and his friend text messaging back and forth about, why don't they teach us to do our taxes? How come they don't teach us a financial calculator, things like that. So you're right. They are very much interested in the subject. So I'm just wondering, as a principal, how much flexibility do you have to implement some of those things?
That's a good question. I think that's going to vary from district to district, school system to school system. Mind you, I haven't been a principal since 2017. So there's been a lot of changes since 2017. As a principal,
My bad. I thought you were. I'm sorry. I joined late.
No, it's okay. But I can say, generally, a teacher or an administrator, just by the fact that you're not supervised with children 24 hours a day, you're going to have some leeway to incorporate examples or scenarios based on your knowledge and your skill set. And so in my school, we played fantasy football. The school, I was principal at Karen Crow High for a couple of years in right outside of Lafayette, Louisiana. And we played fantasy football across the school, right? And the high school boys loved that. That's not in the curriculum, but it was definitely an opportunity for us to have those discussions for math, and have the math teachers to help the kids understand odds and things like that. So you have some leeway and some autonomy. More districts, some more than others. And in my work, I've seen some districts that are very, very tight and rigid with things like this, and some that are much more loose.
Thanks for that. I kind of wish you were my high school principal now with that fantasy football thing going on. So
Yes, it was, yeah, fun times.
how did you do, by the way?
I never won. And right around that time is where they started putting out like all of the, and you know what? I said fantasy football. That wasn't accurate. Now that you got me processing it, it wasn't fantasy football. It was the March Madness brackets that we did. So
okay.
wrong sport, but similar.
Yes.
But yeah, I never won.
Just as monotonous too, so that's
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Yeah.
I was thinking about like, okay, well, no. My son and I are doing fantasy football now, so
Cool.
that's what's happening.
Anyone else have some questions? Any questions? Or what about your children? What questions have they asked you? And do they ask you?
Yeah,
You
I think
have a
that-
young man.
Mhm.
Well, I took him to the cash flow game on Saturday with Deborah.
How did
Again,
that
Deborah
go?
was excited to see him. Yeah. He did a lot better this time too. He remembered and he was like really good with his little ledger. Yeah, he was buying stocks and he was catching other people. He was like, somebody read the article and was like, no, and he goes, wait a second. You can't lose in this deal. What are you talking about? And then she looked at it again. She goes, oh yeah, you're right. And he was like, yeah.
Good. And
It was fun. Yeah.
he's 12, right? Or close to 12,
He's 12, yes.
right?
Yeah.
Thank you for
And I
that.
do have him like a little credit card and he has to earn and stuff on it, but yeah. He
Great.
still asks for more money and
Of
stuff
course.
to be bought for him though.
Well, he should be out earning it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're about to give him the gardener job, so
Oh, good. Good.
yeah.
Angel, you have a question? Oh, and then Ted. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes?
I have a comment, a little quick story. I have 4 adult children and my son's the oldest. And I remember when he was 14 years old, he worked at the arcade, at the computer store for a day, and they paid him $60. The very next day I said, where are the $60? He's like, I spent them at the arcade. I'm like, what? The whole $60? Yes. So I said, oh no, we can't do that. So the very next day he worked a whole day and it was $100. I said, okay, come here. I'm going to show you what you're going to do with your $100. $25 are going to go to, you'd like to buy a pair of pants, some socks or a shirt. The other 25 are going to go for your Cheerios or your milk, because you like to eat, right? The other 25, you're going to save them. And he would say, okay, mom, okay. But then when it came to the last 25, I said, the last 25 go to your mom. He's like, why? Why do I have to give you money? I said, because every dollar you give me, it's going to multiply. Remember that. You have to give your mom money. You can't forget your mom. So because he was obedient for 4 or 5 years, he did that. When he turned 18, he said, well, mom, I have X amount of money. I'm ready to buy my car. I said, well, Andrew, the money you have is, that's good, but guess what? You actually have double. He's like, no, I only have this much. And I'm like, no, because every time you gave me the money, I saved it. So your money's double. It's so ironic. Now he's a financial advisor. He has his first baby after waiting for 17 years to become a father. That baby wasn't even born and she has all kinds of policies. Always thinking about money, right? And coming from a Hispanic family, we were never taught about money. And my youngest daughter, who's part of your group, which is Giselle, she would always tell me, Mom, you're leaving money on the table. People come to you for this and for that. And she's busy right now, but because I saw the email come through about the Zoom, I said, you know what, let me listen to this. There's a message here for me, right? It doesn't matter how old we are, we always learn something new from everybody. And I remember those principles. I remember my first time I stepped on the classroom grounds. I remember till this day, I'll never forget, I cried. How could my grandmother leave me in school, right? those people that are teaching our children are a very big part of their life forever. So those principals, those teachers, they're, an extension of mommy and daddy, right? So many talks. My mom always says in Spanish, cuiden su dinero. That means take care of your money. I just wanted to share. Thank you for your messages, and I'm glad I'm part of the Zoom today. Things happen for a reason, right?
Yep. Thank you, Rose. Thrilled you're here.
Yeah.
Angel, and then Ted, and then Seema.
Yeah, I am. So I taught through elementary and I taught middle school when I finished out. And I taught at a high poverty school, 45% Hispanic, 40% Black, 15% mixed white and Asian. And I had a lot of kids that said, hey, I'm going to be a pro ball player. And so I used that as a chance to say, let's kind of go through this, because they're like, I'm going to be rich one day. I'm going to have me a Bentley. I'm going to have a Rollie. They told me this one day that I'm going to have a blinged out Rollie like Jay-Z. And I was like, first off, it's a new blow, but we can go there. And so we pulled it up on the screen and they were like, that's not Hublot, that's Hublot. I'm like, oh no, babe, that's Hublot. And that's what he has. Not everything's a Rolex. And we talked about those things. And the cool thing was I said, when you have money, you're not really going to want to spend it on a bunch of things, because really you're going to want to pay people to do the things you don't want to do. And it was really just getting to have those conversations. And I miss my babies, because I know they're not biologically mine, but they're my babies, right?
Yeah.
And
I know the feeling.
oh God, I miss those conversations, and I miss getting to tell them my dreams, because the other teachers, I could never share my dreams. They'd shoot them down. But I could tell my students my dreams and they would support me 100%. When I did finally get a Rolex, because that was what we did when we met some financial milestones, we got one. I had some of my babies in my class that were like, Miss, you deserve that. Because they'd been listening, and they had been listening to me share my dreams, and they were supporting my dreams, and they wanted to see me succeed. And so you may think that those 12, 13, 14-year-olds are not listening to you, but they really are, because they're taking it in. They may be trying to act hard, but they really do hear what you have to say. And for me personally, I left teaching because I didn't get along with my administrator. So I'm really glad that you weren't a micromanager or leading by fear, because that was where I was at. And I was fortunate enough that I was given the opportunity to lead, because I didn't need that paycheck. I was doing it because I love teaching. But I wanted to establish a relationship with my students, because they were so far behind. They were several grade levels behind. And I had to let them know that I loved them, and then they loved me, because once we had that, I knew they were going to work their tails off for me. And so we got to share on on a whole different level. And I mean, I remember the kids were like, the ones that at first said that they were going to go play pro ball, and by the end of it, they said that wasn't what they were going to do. And one of my boys, we still talk, and he got his OSHA certification. He's in high school now. He works at the CEC. He's doing classes at the CEC to like go into construction and stuff. And he's like, Miss, I want to do that apartment thing like you. And so those are, one of my girls showed up at one of my meetups, and everybody was like, oh, she used to be your teacher? And they're like, yeah, like a year and a half ago.
Is your name Angel?
Yes.
So Angel, imagine like you doing all of this financial education, and then your son saying, I'm going to be a pro ball player, right? That's my son, right?
Oh,
so,
wow, yeah.
So now the shift in that conversation is like, if I ask him what he wants to be after we've had these discussions, it's not really trying to change his focus. He loves sports. He loves entertainment. He loves the show of sports. And so if we were to ask him that right now, he would say, I want to own the team. And that's really trying to like change his attitude from the showness of it to the business of it.
Yeah, but that's like the fact that you didn't shoot down an idea like that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's huge, because I had students that, I mean, I had girls that would tell me things like, my daddy says I'm just going to grow up and have babies. And for me to say, girl, we can change that. Your current situation does not have to be your destination.
Exactly.
And to be able to have those conversations was amazing. And some of those girls, like we're still Facebook friends, and they ask me how they can get into like property management, or how they can get into this space, because they want to get to a better spot. They don't want to be where they're at, and they want to work to get out of it. And it's just amazing that I got to be a part of that. And I wish I would have been able to stick with it longer, but me and the principal, we butted heads, and I didn't have to be there, and she didn't quite get that. So
Thank you very much, Angel. We're crunching on time, so Ted, what you got for us?
Now, this is kind of, at least from my point of view, I thought have thought as an amusing anecdote from a number of years ago, where a teacher was trying to teach fractions, let's say in a ghetto school, and the curriculum called for using examples like, half an apple, an eighth of an orange, a quarter of a peach, quarter of a pear, something like that. And the kids didn't seem to be getting it. And then the teacher realized that this was the ghetto, and they didn't know anything about fruit. But when he talked about fractions in terms of cutting a nickel bag, everybody got it. Got fired for the examples he was using in the circumstances.
Ooh.
But I always thought that was a rather ingenious way of getting to the kids, by understanding the language that existed in their environment, in the circumstances. A lot of times people understand more than we give them credit for, just because they have different examples for the for the same, let's say, for the same concepts. So,
So that
teaching
same
our family
concept-
business. I always joke that we're getting even with our kids, because two of them teach junior high.
Thank you, Ted, very much. Seema,
Hi, so Peggy had told us something to do very much like what Rose said about having 4 different, giving money to a young kid and putting it in, say, 4 baskets, and I don't have any biological family members that I could do it with. So my daughter's friend's daughter is 5, and I started it with her. I mean, I didn't, her parents did. I supply the money. And I think it's been going on for 2 months now. It is still a hard concept in some ways, but I keep asking her, and they say that it is going well. And the part that she earns, I guess, or something, they need to make her jobs harder, which I think is not fair, but that is my thing. And as most people on here know, I came from a different culture where people in upper classes did not discuss money. And even though I've spent most of my time in the US, we never discuss money, and my kids are in their 30s and never discuss money. And I am teaching them now, and boy, do we fight. And poor Cliff gets the text about Cliff should get hazard pay, considering all the stuff I put him through. Because my girls,
now that you bring it up, no,
my
I'm kidding.
girls are learning in their 30s, and only because we have been blessed that we never needed money. But that's no reason not to learn, because when we are dead, they can really screw up,
Absolutely.
and lose everything that they have. That is why. So if I ever get any young biological family members who will listen to it, because even when we have some, they say, why, there's no need to. We have a lot of money. Our kids will have a lot of money. So, but that's a cultural thing, I mean, we are a minority in the big scheme.
thank you, Seema. Taishan, you're up.
To the point that the gentleman was just speaking about, I actually taught a lesson yesterday in trying to introduce some basic concepts to my student, the difference between having a business and going from an idea to actually designing a business. And I was totally losing them. And I'm not going to say that I teach in the ghetto, but I used a example that I probably not would have used if my principal was standing in the room, but I used something that I knew that they would able to relate from the neighborhood. And trust me, by the end of my lesson, and even if you came by tomorrow, if you asked my students how to take something from a idea to actually having a business and all of the things that need to be put in place, they'd be able to explain it to you. And as long as they can get to the end goal and you utilize what they already know in their background, then that's teaching.
Yeah,
Great.
making it relatable to them, right?
That's
Yeah,
terrific.
because if they're going to turn around and say to me, why do I need to know this? And there are things that they know about business and business concepts, but they don't have all of the idea. It's being able to help them navigate to be able to put all of the pieces together so that they can be successful.
I have a question for you, Tyshawn. Will that stop them from shoplifting?
I would go as far as to say yes. One, because they would have an idea of all that should be in place to keep them, that business owner put in place preventative measures. They should now, going through my course, understand right and wrong as well as the regulations. And is it worth it to spend something that might be $20 that can turn into you losing days of your life? So again, making sure that they have a holistic education, they should be able to know that they shouldn't do that.
Yep. Well, we'll see. Thank you for that teaching. I appreciate that.
I want to say, like, so much of my work is about exposure, right?
Mhm.
It's just about like the kids having access to lessons that certain kids don't, right? Like my kids will have access to information and applications of the information that I never had, right? And it doesn't mean that it's going to solve all of the problems of our society or just some of the systemic issues that are out here in the world. But if the kid has heard it before or been exposed to it, it gives them an opportunity to seek out additional information, right? It gives parents a way to have the conversation, even if nobody taught it to them, right? Like, how could I teach it? Just read the book and rhyme the words, right? And when the kids ask you a question, get on YouTube, right? If that's the only way that you can share the information. So just with those couple of comments that I heard, I would say, like, be careful of thinking that this type of education will solve problems that are way bigger than education, but education can be a great foundation or launch point, right? And that's something that I would say based on some of those comments.
Yeah. Now there's systemic issues that a little bit of exposure ain't going to fix.
Right.
The fact that on a standardized test, you've got my kids having to learn about both sides, aft, and these words that they're never going to apply to their lives. Why is that what they're reading about? I mean, it needs to be rethought. I mean, I'm in Texas. We don't even have a union. Like, we have nothing. And if we strike, we lose our jobs. So it's just different here. But it's I don't know. It takes so much more than just exposure a few times. It has to be a whole change. Like, it all has to change. And we have to be thinking about kids when these things are created, not some pie in the sky idea of where they should be at developmentally, because it's not matching up right now.
Nope.
We're expecting the kids to be way beyond where they are age-wise.
Thank you. And we're at the top of the hour. So Seema, real quick, and then Cliff, real quick, please. You're muted.
No, I'm done.
Oh.
I let me lower that. I'm done.
Oh, okay. Cliff, real quick.
Yeah, so John, Angel, Tyshawn, I just want to say, thank you all, for stepping out of the box and doing something different to make the lives of children better and educate them on something that can actually do something to make their lives better. I think we need more of what you do in the school systems today. What our children are being taught today builds our society of tomorrow. And what you are doing needs to go out to all the schools. And I wish I knew the magic formula to make that happen. but we need what you guys provide and a lot of it.
Thank you very much. So true, so true. Well, I want to thank you very much, Sean, for coming on. This has just been absolutely fabulous. I want you to come back again because you really got the conversation going. It'd be really great to do like a little panel. That might be fun. All you guys that have spoken today would make a great panel, and I'll have to think about how we could do that. So thank you, John, very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for the invite, Peggy. I really enjoyed myself.